There are a few man-made things on the earth that are as massive as the beautiful behemoth that is the Icon of the Seas, making the Icon of the Seas one of the largest moving objects ever created. During your coastal exploration and tours, the ship itself will be refueled with a tonnage of 250,800 GT and a length of 1,198 feet, 365 meters. This giant vessel easily outclasses every other cruise ship that has ever cruised the seas and takes the spot of the largest cruise ship in the world. For reference, it's said to be 5 times larger than the Titanic itself. The sheer enormity of the Icon of the Seas allowed its constructors to create the largest water park on a ship ever, with 7 different pools and 6 water slides, and most impressively, whirlpools for the first time on a ship ever. Plus, if you'd like an adventure at sea with children, you'd also have a special neighborhood that's specifically made for children and parents in mind. Not to mention the fact that thanks to its extreme passenger capacity, made possible by the cabins and suites which are spanned across 20 decks, allows for an incredible capacity of around 10,000 people. You're probably assuming that something as colossal as the Icon of the Seas requires tremendous amounts of power, and you'd be right in your assumption. To properly accommodate all its occupants, all while granting the ship enough might to maintain its cruise speed of 22 knots, the Icon of the Seas has to produce an astounding 67,500 kilowatts of power, which is why one must ask themselves, how does a ship of this size get its power? Well, let's find out. We've already mentioned the gargantuan size of the Icon. However, to fully appreciate how incredibly big it is, you'd have to compare it to the Beacon of New York, the mighty Empire State Building. You'd be astonished to find out that the length of the Icon, 365 meters, roughly equals the height of the Empire State, which sits at 381 meters. Which means that if we were to put the Icon of the Seas upright next to the Empire State, they'd both look virtually the same in terms of height. Furthermore, comparing the width will only further amplify how big the Royal Caribbean's flagship is, as its beam is almost 10 meters wider than the Empire State's north to south width, 57 meters, while its height, including the submerged part hull, roughly equals the east-west width, 129 meters, making the Icon of the Seas one of the largest moving objects ever created. Which leads us to the question, what kind of an engine could possibly move the Icon? The Icon of the Seas is not powered by a singular power plant. Rather, it utilizes the power of 6 different state-of-the-art engines that are as the ship itself. The engines that power the largest ship in the world are made by Wärtsilä, one of the most well-known power source manufacturers in the marine world, and they've been supplying the Royal Caribbean for years now. The Icon of the Seas will utilize 6 of Wärtsilä's newest 460mm bore by 580mm stroke 46TS DF. The largest 16-cylinder configuration of the engine boasts a size of 13.4 meters long, 5.83 meters tall, and 5.73 meters wide, all weighing a staggering 252 tons. The engines that are most likely going to be used in the Icon of the Seas are a bit smaller 9-cylinder configuration. However, they'll still be incredibly large at 11.5 meters in length, 5.71 meters tall, and around 3.93 meters wide, and will still produce around 11,000 kilowatt per unit. Talking about the pristine cruising experience, the Icon of the Seas offers up the most exquisite of amenities that no other cruise ship, including the Royal Caribbean's own Oasis lineup, as it's intended to become the patron of the all-new Icon class of ships that are going to be made in the future. To distinguish their flagship vessel from the quote-unquote lesser ships, the Icon of the Seas will, for starters, be divided into 8 different neighborhoods, 5 of which are completely new, including the Aquadome, Thrill Island, Chill Island, Surfside, and the Hideaway. The Aquadome is easily the most impressive of all of these, as its trademark feature is the 82-foot high glass dome that consists of 600 individual panes of glass, which allow for a beautiful oceanic view during the day. During the night, the Aquadome turns into the Aqua Theater. The Aqua Theater will be a thrilling experience for those of us who love a bit of adrenaline, alongside the largest on-ship waterfall ever, which is over 50 feet tall. Furthermore, the state-of-the-art projectors will be ideal for watching shows and movies. The Aquadome will also house several restaurants, bars, and cafes, which will offer all kinds of food and drinks that will ideally suit everybody's liking. Next in line is the Thrill Island, which could only be described as an entire theme park at sea, which in itself sounds cool. However, taking into consideration the fact that it consists of a number of record-breaking substitutes makes it even cooler than it already is. The most notable feature of the Thrill Island is the Category 6 water park, which is considered to be the biggest water park at sea of all time, spanning across more than 17,000 square feet with 6 different record-breaking water slides. These include the raft-based Storm Surge and Hurricane Hunter slides, the Looping Storm Chaser slide, which allows for a racing contest between 2 people, and the very scary Frightening Bolt, which initially drops you 46 feet from the platform into the slide. So if you're acrophobic, then you should definitely skip this one. However, the most impressive water slide, in our opinion, the Pressure Drop, with its 66-degree incline. The name of the water park is also a wordplay between the number of slides that it houses and the hurricane scale, and we honestly find the naming very clever. Alongside the Category 6, the Thrill Island will allow you to experience the Flow Rider Wave Simulator, climb ropes, run through an obstacle course, or skywalk up to 154 feet above the ocean, which would be a sight to behold, wouldn't you agree? Granted, all those amenities require a ton of electricity for powering up and working properly, and the ship itself will need to burn through tons of fuel per day to keep both the features and premises up and running, and also allow the ship to continue on its voyage at a pace of 22 knots per hour. It's believed that to produce enough power for the ship to run properly, a single engine will have to burn through around 1,000 gallons of fuel per hour. This means that 6 of these units would consume up to 144,000 gallons of fuel per 24 hours, and in return, they'll provide the ship with nigh of 70,000 kilowatts of power. 144,000 gallons is simply way too much, and you're probably asking yourself, how will the Icon be able to get a sufficient amount of fuel for its 7-day-long cruises? Well, by having the largest fuel tank ever fitted to a ship, that's how. And not just one, but 2 of those. These new fuel tanks, each of which holds 307 tons of fuel, is 90 feet long and have been specifically designed for the extremely hard task of providing fuel to the very thirsty Icon of the Seas, and they'll prove to be more than capable of doing so. The ginormous size of the engine, alongside with the fact that it utilizes 2-stage turbocharging, allows it to have a record-breaking power density of up to 1,300 kilowatt per cylinder, which equals 11,700 kilowatt in total per engine while using heavy fuel oil. However, there is a major drawback of using HFO as a propellant. It's the fact that burning through it creates unbelievably high amounts of toxicity and carbon dioxide, which makes the usage of the engine that runs exclusively on fuel oil very limited. And due to the ever-rising regulations concerning the usage of fossil fuels, the life of highly polluting HFO engines is coming to an end very rapidly, not to mention the ever-rising price of fuel that are making heavy oil fuel and fossil fuels considerably less economically viable. And that's exactly where the new 46TS-DF engine steps in, as what makes these engines much more special over the previously used engines is the fact that it has a very advanced dual-fuel technology, which allows the engine to run on either both liquid and gas fuel, which will allow the Icon of the Seas to adapt to whatever fuel is currently available or more economically viable. The fuel that will primarily be used, though, is liquefied natural gas, which will be considerably more economically viable for the ship to use. You see, even though the power efficiency is slightly lower than that of HFO, the price difference can be as high as 30% less in favor of LNG. Not to mention that by utilizing LNG, the amount of air pollution gets diminished significantly over what it usually is, while also significantly reducing the amount of nitrogen oxides produced. Not just that, but the engine also has been future-proofed, as it will be able to run on carbon-free fuel options when they become widely adopted, without any impact on the power figures that the engine itself produces, meaning that the Icon of the Seas will be able to cruise the oceans for decades to come, without worrying about the pressures that come over with the ever-rising restrictions around fossil fuels. But wait, If the ship uses more LNG compared to HFO, which is already problematic in terms of fuel consumption, how in the world will the Icon of the Seas be able to complete a single cruise without running out of fuel? Well, you see, the Icon of the Seas won't exclusively use fuel combustion engines. Oh no, the ship will also utilize fuel cell technology in a rather unique and radical way. The fuel cell energy that gets produced won't interfere with the engines when it comes down to the propulsion of the boat. Rather, the energy created from fuel cells will be stored in the Icon's batteries and will serve as one of the Icon's main sources of producing electricity, while also being the main way of producing fresh water, as the Icon will produce over 90% of its fresh water on board. And also, by lowering the strain on the regular engines, we'll be lowering the fuel consumption significantly, allowing the ship to have even more range. Also, the ship will have waste heat recovery systems, which will significantly lower what little gas emissions remain, and also noticeably reduce the fuel consumption of the engines. The ship will also use a state-of-the-art air lubrication system of the underwater hull, which will send millions of microscopic bubbles alongside the vessel's hull, which will lower friction and resistance, further improving fuel economy. The Icon of the Seas will also be the first ship ever that has been outfitted with waste-to-power technology, specifically microwave-assisted pyrolysis and micro-autogasification, which will allow the ship to convert food scraps, cardboard paper, and other scrap material into additional energy. Plus, not only are these systems not toxic, they also produce biochar, a bioproduct that can be used as a soil nutrient. Plus, let's not forget that you won't be offshore for all those 7 days, and that during your coastal exploration and tours, the ship itself will be refueled, and it will be ready for its voyage once again. Oh, and while being refueled, the Icon of the Seas will also be recharged too. You see, when the vessel gets berthed, its electric grid gets connected to a shore power connection, and since the Icon uses batteries as a primary way of powering the electric units, it will be fully recharged by the time you board back on the ship, which means that both the fuel cell generators and the engine themselves will have much less work to do during the cruise itself. And finally, in the case of the electric supply system malfunctioning, there'll be no need to worry, and you won't be left in the dark, thanks to the fact that the ship has emergency generators that are located on the top deck, which have their own fuel reserves and are completely independent of the electric infrastructure itself. They can also be used for restarting the engines if some of them malfunction due to electrical failure. So overall, we're looking forward to seeing the all-new King of the Seas in the water, and we simply can't wait for its maiden voyage.